On their 23rd anniversary, Daniel Harper discovered a secret that shattered everything he thought he knew about his wife, who was the woman he married for over 2 decades. And what was she hiding from him all this time? Tonight, a single revelation will ignite a chain of lies, betrayal, and violence, and nothing will ever be the same. Daniel Harper believed in rituals. On the evening of their 23rd wedding anniversary, he moved through the house with deliberate care, setting the table exactly as he always had. 2 candles, red, evenly spaced, the same wine Claire loved, the same jazz record humming softly in the background. Consistency, Daniel thought, was the quiet proof of love. Claire appeared at the doorway dressed in deep blue, her hair pinned back in a way he hadn't seen in years. She smiled, but it arrived a second too late, as if summoned rather than felt. Daniel noticed, then dismissed it. After 23 years, you learned not to interrogate every silence, they toasted. They reminisced. Dialogue drifted toward safe memories, vacations, old neighbors, stories polished smooth by repetition. Yet Claire's hands trembled whenever she lifted her glass. Her eyes kept darting toward the hallway, toward the bedroom, as though something waited there. Narration filled the spaces Daniel refused to question. He told himself marriages survived by choosing comfort over curiosity. Claire had always been private. That was never a crime. Privacy was different from secrecy, he believed. One protected love, the other destroyed it. Dinner ended quietly. Plates were cleared. The clock above the stove ticked louder than usual, each second stretching. Claire slid a small wrapped box across the table, her fingers lingering for just a moment too long. Daniel laughed, thanked her, and placed it beside his own gift, a bracelet she had admired months ago. She barely glanced at it. "Open yours," she said, voice tight. Inside the box was a watch, elegant. Expensive, not her usual taste. Daniel smiled anyway, then felt something else beneath the velvet lining. Paper, thick, official. His smile stiffened, confusion blooming. He looked up. Claire had already stood, turning away toward the kitchen, her back rigid. Daniel unfolded the envelope slowly. His heartbeat grew louder than the music. Inside were documents copies, yellowed at the edges, a birth certificate, medical forms, a driver's license photo that made his breath catch. The face was Claire's, the name was not. The room seemed to tilt. 20. 3 years compressed into a single sharp moment. Daniel tried to anchor himself to logic. Maybe it was an error, a relative. A stranger who looked like her, but instinct whispered otherwise. Something ancient and dangerous stirred in his gut, warning him this discovery could not be undone. He called her name, but his voice came out thin. Claire froze at the counter. For a long second, neither of them moved. The air felt heavy, pressurized, as if the house itself were holding its breath. Then she spoke without turning around. "You weren't supposed to find that tonight." Daniel stared at the papers again, noticing details he had missed before, altered dates, official stamps, signatures that looked rehearsed. His hands began to shake. The life he trusted felt suddenly staged, like a set collapsing after the cameras stopped rolling. Memories replayed differently now, every unexplained absence echoing louder, every unanswered question suddenly demanding attention, demanding truth. Panic crept in slowly, then all at once. He realized nothing would ever feel stable again. The silence between them screamed louder than words ever could. The candles flickered violently, as if reacting to the words themselves. Daniel felt the floor drop away beneath him. He didn't yet know what the papers meant, only that his marriage had just cracked open. As Claire finally turned to face him, her eyes filled not with anger, but fear, Daniel understood one terrifying truth. The perfect night had never been meant to last. Daniel did not sleep. After Claire retreated into the bedroom and closed the door with unbearable softness, he sat alone at the kitchen table, the documents spread before him like evidence in a trial he never agreed to attend. The candles had burned down to stubs, wax pooled like frozen tears. The perfect night had dissolved into something unrecognizable. He read the name again and again, It refused to settle in his mind. It didn't belong to Claire, yet every photograph insisted otherwise. The driver's license showed the same eyes, colder perhaps, stripped of warmth by flash photography. The sex marker was different. The date of birth matched. Daniel felt his pulse in his throat, loud and erratic. Narration pressed inward as denial fought reason. He told himself identities could be stolen, documents forged, mistakes buried in bureaucracy, but this was too careful, too complete. Someone had built a life here, then erased it with surgical precision, and that someone was sleeping down the hall. At dawn, Claire left without a word. Her car disappeared before Daniel could form the courage to follow. The silence she left behind felt intentional, weaponized. He waited an hour, then another. When she did not return, he opened his laptop. He typed the name into the search bar with shaking hands. Nothing. No social profiles, no family trees, no casual mentions. It was as if the name had never existed at all. Daniel leaned back, unease tightening around his chest. People did not vanish like that unless they were helped. He refined the search. Public records, archived databases, legal filings. Minutes passed. Then the screen changed. A single result appeared, buried deep in a state court archive. Access restricted. Case sealed. The date jumped out at him immediately. 24 years ago, 1 year before he met Claire. His breath stalled. Daniel clicked anyway. A warning flashed. Unauthorized access prohibited. He ignored it and kept reading what little was visible. The case classification made his stomach drop. Violent offense. Status unresolved. Notes redacted. He closed the laptop abruptly, as if the glow itself might implicate him. His reflection stared back from the dark screen, unfamiliar, frightened. For the first time, Daniel wondered whether loving Claire had been a choice he was allowed to make. Memory betrayed him now. Conversations replayed with altered meaning. Her aversion to hospitals. Her refusal to be photographed. The way she stiffened whenever police sirens passed too close to the house. These weren't quirks. They were defenses. The front door opened suddenly. Daniel nearly jumped out of his chair. Claire stood there, her expression unreadable, eyes scanning the room before landing on the table. She saw the documents immediately. So did the lie in his face. "You looked it up," she said quietly. He didn't answer. Words felt dangerous now. "That name is dead." Claire continued, stepping closer. "You don't understand what digging does." Daniel finally met her gaze. "Then make me understand." For a moment, he thought she might. Her mouth opened slightly, breath catching. Then her phone vibrated. She checked the screen and the color drained from her face. "They found it," she whispered. Daniel felt the floor tilt again. Who found what? Claire looked at him with regret and fear. "The record," she said. "And now they know you exist." Before he could ask who they were, she turned and walked past him, heading for the bedroom, locking the door behind her. Daniel stared after her, heart hammering, as certainty took shape. The name might not exist anymore, but whatever it was tied to did, and it waited. The house stayed locked in silence after Claire disappeared behind the bedroom door. Daniel did not knock. Whatever barrier now existed between them felt solid, deliberate. Instead, he drifted through the living room, touching the edges of a life he suddenly did not recognize. Every framed photograph felt staged, every shared smile suspiciously well rehearsed. Sleep came in fragments. When it did, it dragged memories with it, reshaping them against this new truth. Daniel began to see patterns where he once saw personality. Claire's distance from neighbors, her reluctance to attend office parties. The way she redirected conversations whenever childhood came up. He had called it privacy, now it felt like training. By morning, curiosity overpowered fear. Daniel opened an old storage box in the hallway closet, one he had not touched in years. Inside were remnants of their early marriage, greeting cards, outdated phones, folded letters. He searched slowly, methodically, as if afraid the truth might break if handled too roughly. The letters revealed nothing. But the phones did. One device still powered on, its battery miraculously alive. The contacts list was nearly empty. No family, no hometown friends, only work numbers and one name marked simply with an initial. M. At work that afternoon, Daniel did something he had never done before. He searched Claire's employment history. Not online, those records were too clean, but through an old colleague he barely remembered, a man who had retired years earlier. The call was awkward, cautious. Dialogue stayed minimal, polite. "Oh, Claire," the man said slowly. She wasn't there long, smart, kept to herself. "Did she ever talk about her past?" Daniel asked. A pause. "She vanished once, just didn't show up. Came back months later with paperwork, new last name. Management said not to ask questions." Daniel thanked him and hung up, his pulse quickening. Claire had disappeared before. Not metaphorically, literally. He returned home with that realization sitting heavy in his chest. The bedroom door was still closed. Daniel didn't try it. Instead, he opened his laptop again, diving deeper into public databases he had avoided the night before. Marriage licenses, property records, legal filings tied loosely to the name he now recognized as a ghost. Then he found it, a court document filed under a different county, identity change petition, approved. Sealed, the date hit him harder than anything else. 2 months before he met Claire. Daniel stared at the screen, breath shallow. That meant she hadn't just escaped a past, she had planned a future with precision. With intent, their meeting suddenly felt less like fate and more like design. The bedroom door creaked open behind him. Claire stood there, exhausted, hollow-eyed. For a second, they simply looked at each other. No anger, no affection, only recognition of something broken beyond repair. "You were never supposed to know," she said. Daniel turned the laptop toward her. "You changed everything," he replied quietly. "Before me, before us." Her silence confirmed it. Daniel realized then that silence had been the foundation of their marriage, not trust. Every unasked question had been a brick, every deflection a layer of cement. He wondered how many times he had unknowingly protected her by choosing comfort over confrontation. Love, he understood now, had been the easiest place to hide, and he had helped her hide, day after day, without ever knowing what he was shielding himself from. That realization hurt more than the documents, because it made him complicit in a lie he never agreed to live with her. Outside, a car slowed in front of the house, then stopped. Daniel noticed before Claire did. Headlights lingered too long, an engine idled. Claire followed his gaze. Fear returned to her face, sharper this time. "That's them," she whispered. Daniel felt something inside him lock into place. Whatever life he had believed in was gone. And someone else was about to knock on the door. The knock never came. Instead, the car outside idled for another tense minute before pulling away, its tires whispering against the pavement like a warning rather than a mistake. Daniel exhaled only when the sound faded. Claire didn't move at all. She stood frozen, as if the wrong breath might summon it back. That wasn't them, Daniel said, though he wasn't sure who he was trying to convince. Claire finally turned toward him. Her face had lost its carefully maintained composure, replaced by something raw and unguarded. Fear, yes, but also calculation. It unsettled him more than panic would have. "We can't pretend anymore," Daniel said. His voice was steady, surprising even himself. "Whatever you've been hiding has followed us here." Claire shook her head slowly. "You think you want the truth," she replied. "But truth doesn't fix things, it only breaks them." Daniel laughed once, humorless. "You built our entire marriage on silence. Don't tell me now that honesty is the problem." She flinched. That reaction told him more than words ever could. Claire walked into the living room and sat down, hands clasped tightly in her lap. For the first time since he'd known her, she looked small. "I didn't lie about loving you," she said quietly. That part was real. Daniel remained standing. What about everything else? The room filled with heavy pauses, the kind that begged for narration because dialogue alone could never carry their weight. Claire stared at the floor, then finally spoke. "The person in those documents was me," she admitted, but it's not who I am anymore. That doesn't answer anything, Daniel said. She looked up sharply. It answers everything. I survived something I wasn't meant to. I left a life that would have killed me. I did what I had to do. Did that include murder? Daniel asked, the word tasting foreign in his mouth. Claire stood abruptly. No, she snapped. Then her voice softened, not like you're imagining. Daniel stepped closer, then explained the sealed records, the violent charge, the erased name. She hesitated, then shook her head. I can't, not all of it. That's not how this works anymore, Daniel replied. You don't get to choose how much truth I deserve. Claire's eyes filled with tears, but they didn't fall. If you keep digging, she said, you'll hurt people who don't deserve it, including yourself. Are you threatening me? Daniel asked. No, she said. I'm warning you. For a moment, the years between them collapsed. Daniel saw the woman he had defended in arguments, comforted in silence, trusted without question, and layered over that image was someone else entirely, someone capable of careful erasure, of starting over without remorse. Did you plan this? He asked suddenly, meeting me, marrying me. Claire didn't answer right away. When she did, it was barely audible. I planned to disappear. You weren't part of that plan. That admission landed harder than any accusation. Daniel felt anger rise, sharp and overdue. So I was collateral, he said. A cover? No, she said quickly. You were a chance to be normal, to stop running. And when that failed, Daniel pressed. Her silence stretched too long. Someone contacted you, he said. You told me that last night. Claire nodded. A man. He knows who I was. He's been watching for years. Why now? Because secrets don't stay buried forever, she said. They just wait. Daniel turned away, pacing. His thoughts raced, assembling pieces into a picture he didn't want to see. You didn't just hide from your past, he said slowly. You buried it, and now it's digging back. Claire met his gaze. If you love me, she said, you'll stop. Daniel stopped pacing. Love, the word felt heavier now, compromised. He realized this was the moment everything pivoted on submission or resistance, silence or confrontation. I can't, he said. Claire's expression hardened instantly. Something closed behind her eyes. Then you've already chosen, she replied. Her phone buzzed again. She looked at the screen, then at Daniel, fear replaced by resolve. They want to meet, she said, tonight. Daniel felt the weight of that settle deep in his chest. He didn't know who they were yet, but he knew nothing would survive the meeting. They didn't meet that night. Claire claimed it was safer to wait, safer to choose daylight, safer to control the terms. Daniel didn't argue. Control had already slipped from his hands. Instead, he watched as she packed a small bag and left before dawn, offering no destination, no reassurance. Only a look that asked him not to follow. Hours passed before Daniel realized waiting was another form of surrender. By afternoon, he was driving across town to an address he barely remembered. A low concrete building tucked between a pawn shop and a closed diner. The name came from the sealed record's margins, a reference so faint he almost missed it. Marcus Reed, licensed investigator, the third shadow Claire never mentioned, but clearly feared. Marcus was older than Daniel expected, with tired eyes and a posture shaped by years of listening rather than acting. His office smelled of stale coffee and paper. He didn't ask why Daniel was there. He already knew. You found the name, Marcus said calmly. Most people stop before that. Daniel sat across from him, hands clasped tightly. I need to know what my wife did. Marcus leaned back. You need to know who she was, he corrected. What she did came after. Narration filled the space as Marcus explained his role. Years ago, he'd been hired to track a disappearance that never officially happened. A violent incident labeled accidental. A body no one wanted to examine too closely. When the trail went cold, so did the case. Until Claire changed her identity and vanished again. She was careful, Marcus said, Smarter than most, but fear leaves patterns. Daniel swallowed. Was it murder? Marcus hesitated. That pause was answer enough. He reached into a drawer and slid a photograph across the desk. The image was grainy, time-stamped, unforgiving. Claire stood in a dim room, her face unreadable, her hands stained dark. At her feet lay a body, twisted unnaturally, blood pooling beneath it. Daniel's breath left him in a rush. The room felt too small, the air too thin. 23 years collapsed into that single frozen frame. She said she was surviving, Daniel whispered, and maybe she was. Marcus replied, but survival doesn't erase consequences. Daniel stared at the photograph, searching for the woman he loved. All he saw was someone capable of standing still after destruction. Someone who knew how to walk away. Why show me this? Daniel asked. Because she won't. Marcus said, and because you're involved now. Daniel looked up sharply. Involved how? Marcus folded his hands. Someone reopened the inquiry, quietly. They're tracing anyone connected to her new life. That includes you. A chill spread through Daniel's chest. Claire said someone contacted her. Marcus nodded. They contacted me too. Wanted confirmation, wanted leverage. Then why help me? Marcus's expression hardened. Because I've seen what happens when the truth gets buried twice. Daniel stood, photo still in hand. What do I do? Marcus met his gaze. You decide whether you're protecting her, or yourself. Outside, the sky had darkened. Daniel sat in his car for a long time before starting the engine. His phone buzzed. A message from Claire. We can't run anymore. Daniel closed his eyes. He knew then that love had turned into liability and silence into threat. Whatever came next would force a reckoning neither of them could escape. As he drove home, one thought followed him relentlessly. This wasn't over. It was only beginning. Daniel stopped sleeping altogether. Days blurred into each other, marked only by the ticking clock and the glow of his phone at night. Every sound in the house felt amplified, every shadow alive. Claire moved through the rooms like a stranger, alternating between tenderness and distance, as if calibrating him, testing how far she could push without breaking him. Narration carried Daniel inward, his thoughts fractured, looping through images he couldn't escape. The photograph Marcus had shown him replayed constantly, overlaying itself onto memories of vacations, anniversaries, quiet mornings. He began questioning his own perception. Had he ignored signs, or had she expertly erased them? Claire became attentive in ways that felt strategic. She cooked his favorite meals, touched his arm when she passed, whispered reassurances at night. "We're safe," she said. "I won't let anything happen to us." The words should have comforted him. Instead, they tightened something deep in his chest. Daniel noticed the contradictions. Her phone was never left unattended, yet she encouraged him to quit his job and stay home until things settled. She framed it as protection, as love, but it felt like isolation, control disguised as concern. One afternoon, Daniel followed her. He hated himself for it, but mistrust had become reflex. Claire drove across town, parked near a public storage facility, and disappeared inside. When she emerged, she carried nothing, no boxes, no bags, just relief. That night, Daniel confronted her quietly. "What's in the unit?" he asked. Claire froze, then smiled. "Emergency memories," she said lightly. "Things I couldn't let go of." "Like the body," Daniel replied. Silence crashed between them. Claire's expression hardened, affection evaporating instantly. "You promised you wouldn't dig," she said. "I never promised," Daniel answered. Her voice dropped. "You don't understand how dangerous this is." "I understand you're lying," he said. Claire stepped closer, invading his space. "Everything I did was to survive," she whispered. "Including you." The words hollowed him out. Daniel felt something inside his mind give way, a fracture spreading quietly. Love and fear tangled until he could no longer separate them. He realized Claire had been shaping his reality for years, deciding what he was allowed to know. That night, Daniel didn't sleep at all. He sat on the edge of the bed while Claire breathed evenly beside him, wondering how easily someone could perform normalcy. He imagined her rehearsing emotions the way others rehearsed lies. At dawn, Daniel made a decision he knew he couldn't undo. He recorded her. The device was small, hidden, its red light invisible. When Claire woke, he asked her gently to explain everything, to tell him the truth from the beginning. She hesitated, then spoke. Her voice was calm, practiced, confessional. She admitted the death, claimed self-defense, claimed manipulation, claimed fear. Daniel listened, heart pounding, knowing every word tightened the noose around one of them. As she spoke, Daniel noticed something else. Claire's hand rested beneath the pillow. When she shifted, metal caught the light, a knife. Daniel stayed still, understanding too late that her cracks were not forming. They had already broken. The realization anchored him in place, every instinct screaming to run while another urged him to stay calm. He focused on breathing, on the ceiling fan's slow rotation, on the sound of traffic outside. Claire turned toward him, eyes opening, unreadable in the dim light. She smiled faintly, unaware that the balance between them had shifted. Daniel knew then that the next conversation would decide everything. Truth was no longer abstract. It was sharp, waiting, and dangerously close. Tomorrow, he would confront her again, but this time he would not be unarmed. Someone else would hear what she had done. Someone who could no longer be silenced. The cracks inside Daniel's mind widened, preparing him for a meeting he did not yet know was coming. And it would introduce a shadow far darker than fear. Morning arrived without relief. Daniel watched sunlight crawl across the bedroom walls, illuminating the quiet wreckage of the night before. Claire moved as if nothing had changed, humming softly while making coffee, her voice steady, almost gentle. The normalcy felt obscene. It was the performance that terrified him most. Daniel said nothing at first. He let the day breathe, let her believe the moment had passed. Narration lingered on his restraint, the discipline it took to mask terror beneath routine. He realized now how easily love could be weaponized, how intimacy provided the closest access to harm. They sat across from each other at the kitchen table. Steam rose between them like a barrier. Claire reached for his hand. He let her. "You look tired." She said, "I am." Daniel replied. She studied him carefully. "We should leave." She said, "Disappear, together." The words struck him hard, together. It sounded like partnership, but felt like captivity. "That won't fix this," Daniel said quietly. Claire's smile faltered. "It will keep us alive." Daniel pulled his hand away. "Alive isn't the same as innocent." Her jaw tightened. "You're judging me now." "I'm trying to understand you," he said. "There's a difference." Claire leaned back, crossing her arms. "You think you're entitled to every piece of me." "I think I married a stranger," Daniel replied. The words hung between them, heavy and irreversible. Claire stood and paced the room, agitation slipping through her controlled exterior. "You don't know what it was like," she said. "I was trapped. He controlled everything I did. When I tried to leave, he followed me. That night, it was him or me." Daniel listened, the recorder hidden, active. "And after?" he asked. "I ran," she said. "The system didn't want the truth. They wanted closure, so I gave them silence." Daniel nodded slowly, "And me." Claire stopped pacing. "You were my proof that I could be better." The lie was subtle, almost convincing. Almost, Daniel remembered the dates, the identity change, the careful timing. Love hadn't been an accident. It had been camouflage. "You never planned to tell me," he said. Claire's eyes darkened. "I planned to protect you." "By letting me live a lie?" he asked. Her voice sharpened. "By keeping you alive." Daniel stood. "You didn't just escape your past," he said. "You buried it, and you buried me with it." Claire stepped closer, her tone softening again. "I love you," she said. "That part was never fake." Daniel searched her face. wishing desperately that love alone could redeem everything. But love without truth was manipulation, and he could see it now with painful clarity. "Marcus showed me the photo," Daniel said. Claire froze. "He told me everything," Daniel continued, "about the investigation, about the reopened inquiry." Fear flashed across her face, quickly replaced by anger. "You went to him," she snapped. "After everything I said. I needed the truth," Daniel replied. "You needed control," she said, just like him. That comparison broke something in Daniel. His voice hardened. "Don't do that. Don't rewrite this so you're always the victim." Claire's breathing quickened. "If they come for me," she said, "I won't go back." Daniel met her gaze. "What does that mean?" She didn't answer. The silence told him enough. Daniel felt the weight of his decision settle in. He had crossed a line he could never step back from. Justice and love now stood on opposite sides, demanding loyalty. That evening, Claire packed again, faster this time. Daniel watched, understanding that escape was no longer hypothetical. When her phone buzzed, she answered immediately, her voice low. "Yes," she said, "tonight." She hung up and looked at Daniel, eyes burning with resolve. "They want to talk," she said. "This ends now." Daniel felt his pulse spike. Where? Claire hesitated, then spoke. "At the house." Daniel's stomach dropped. He realized then that the confrontation she feared was no longer external. It was coming from inside, and someone was going to bleed for the truth. They arrived just after dusk. Daniel watched headlights sweep across the living room walls, then fade as a car parked outside. Claire stood near the kitchen counter, calm in a way that felt rehearsed. She had chosen this setting, this timing. Home was supposed to make things safer. Instead, it made everything personal. A knock sounded. One knock controlled. Daniel's pulse hammered as Claire opened the door. A man stepped inside alone, mid-40s, dressed plainly, eyes alert. He introduced himself as Evan Miller, his voice neutral, official without being law enforcement. "We just want clarity," Evan said, glancing between them. Claire gestured for him to sit. Daniel remained standing. The recorder in his pocket felt heavier than before. Dialogue came sparingly, sharpened by fear. Evan asked about the old name, about the night of the death. Claire answered carefully, framing everything as self-defense, coercion, survival. Narration filled the gaps Daniel could no longer ignore. Evan wasn't here to arrest anyone. He was here to measure risk, to decide who would break first. "You changed identities," Evan said. "Why not disappear completely?" Claire smiled thinly. "I wanted a life." Daniel couldn't stop himself. "You wanted cover." Claire turned on him. "You promised." "I promised nothing," Daniel said. "I'm done protecting lies." The temperature in the room dropped. Evan's attention sharpened. "There's a recording," he said quietly. "Isn't there?" Daniel froze. Claire's eyes flicked to his pocket. Calculation replaced affection instantly. "You betrayed me," she said. "I told the truth," Daniel replied. Claire laughed once, brittle. "Truth is just another weapon." She moved quickly, too quickly. Her hand disappeared beneath the counter and came back holding the knife Daniel had seen that morning. The blade caught the light, steady in her grip. Evan stood, hands raised. "Claire," Evan said, "put it down. This ends now." She said, voice eerily calm, "No more men deciding my fate." Daniel stepped forward. "Claire, stop." She looked at him then, really looked, and something like grief crossed her face. "I loved you," she said, "but I won't be caged again." What happened next fractured time. Evan lunged toward the door. Claire turned. Daniel grabbed her wrist. The knife slipped, clattered, then was snatched up again in the same motion. There was a shout, a struggle, bodies collided with furniture. The room filled with sound and panic. The blade found flesh. Daniel felt warmth on his hands before pain registered. Evan staggered back, blood blooming across his shirt. He collapsed against the wall, sliding down slowly, eyes wide with disbelief. Silence followed, heavy and absolute. Claire stared at the knife, then at Daniel. Horror replaced resolve. "I didn't mean," she began. Daniel dropped to his knees beside Evan, pressing his hands against the wound, shaking. "Call an ambulance," he shouted. Claire backed away instead. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance, growing louder. Someone had already called. Neighbors, fate, consequences arriving without invitation. Claire looked around the room, taking in the overturned chair, the blood on the floor, the end of every escape route she had ever planned. Her gaze settled on Daniel, full of something like apology. "I warned you," she whispered. She turned and ran toward the bedroom. Daniel stayed with Evan, hands slick, heart racing, knowing nothing would ever be the same. The truth had finally spoken, and it spoke in blood. Daniel's mind raced through choices he no longer had. Confession, denial, loyalty, justice collided without mercy. He thought of the watch, the dinner, the rituals he believed in. None of them mattered now. The house smelled of metal and fear. Somewhere inside, he accepted that survival would demand testimony, and testimony would demand sacrifice from them all alone. As red spread across the anniversary floor, Daniel understood the next chapter would be written by sirens, statements, and the body no one could save. The sirens arrived before Claire could escape. Red and blue lights spilled across the walls, cutting through the darkness like blades. Daniel stayed where he was, kneeling beside Evan, hands pressed to the wound, desperate for control in a house that had lost all of it. Claire's absence was immediate. Her door slammed, echoing through the room like a challenge. Police officers entered cautiously, weapons drawn. Daniel raised his hands, trying to explain, but his voice trembled. "He's alive. He needs help." The words barely carried over the noise of boots on the floor, the frantic radio calls. One officer crouched beside him, taking over pressure on Evan's wound, murmuring reassurances Daniel didn't feel. Narration filled the gaps between chaos. Time felt distorted, minutes stretching into hours. Daniel's eyes kept darting to the bedroom door, half expecting Claire to return with the knife, half expecting her to disappear forever. The living room, once a place of comfort, was now a stage of violence. The spilled wine, the overturned chair, the anniversary candles melted into wax puddles. Every object seemed innocent and guilty at once. An officer, young and sharp, pied, finally pulled Daniel aside. "What happened?" she asked. Her tone was soft but insistent. Daniel struggled for words. The truth was too large to condense into seconds. She attacked. He managed. It was supposed to be, honestly. I don't know. It just. His voice broke. Claire's phone vibrated on the counter, ignored by everyone but noticed by Daniel. The message preview glimmered. "I warned you." His chest tightened. She had left a trail, a warning. Was it remorse? Pride? Something darker? Evan groaned. His eyes fluttered open. It wasn't. He muttered. Daniel pressed the wound harder, trying to stabilize him. "Stay with me," he whispered. "You're going to be okay." Officers finally cordoned off the living room, taking statements. Daniel sat, hands still bloody, listening to the factual recount of events that now seemed alien. One officer asked if he had been attacked. Daniel shook his head. "No, I wasn't. She." Words failed him. Silence said more. Detectives arrived later, calm and methodical, separating witnesses and collecting evidence. Every step, every recorded motion, made Daniel feel exposed. Marcus's warnings echoed in his mind. Truth buried twice never stays buried quietly. The narrative pressed inward. Daniel realized that nothing he did could undo the damage. A single act, one misjudged movement, had turned the anniversary celebration into a crime scene. He thought of the envelopes, the documents, the lies that had built a life in secret. Each one had led here, to blood. Then, as Daniel rose to follow an officer to give his formal statement, the bedroom door creaked. Claire emerged, pale but deliberate, hands empty. Her eyes held neither fear nor remorse, only calculation. The officers froze, tense, uncertain. "Claire," Daniel said cautiously. What now?" She glanced at the pool of red on the floor, at the chaos she had orchestrated, and smiled faintly. Now, she asked softly, "Now we see who survives the truth." The detectives moved toward her, their tone sharp, demanding answers. Claire didn't resist. She let them lead her, almost ceremoniously. But as she passed Daniel, her gaze lingered, a silent message. The story was far from over, and every secret would soon unravel. Daniel sank to the floor, staring at the anniversary debris. Wine, wax, blood, all mixed together into a grim reminder. The house, once a sanctuary, was now a tomb of lies. Outside, sirens faded as the ambulance carried Evan away. Inside, Daniel knew that justice would arrive slowly, but it would arrive, and the next chapter, the trial, the exposure, the reckoning, was waiting. The anniversary was over, but the story had only begun. The courthouse smelled of polished wood and anticipation. Daniel walked in slowly, hands empty but trembling, every step echoing like a drumbeat of his guilt and fear. Cameras and reporters crowded the lobby, capturing faces, emotions, fragments of the story the world now knew. He could feel Claire's absence even as her name was whispered in every corner. Inside the courtroom, the tension was suffocating. The prosecution presented a meticulous narrative: the hidden identity, the past crime, the sudden confrontation, and the stabbing. Daniel sat quietly, letting the words wash over him, each sentence a reminder that nothing about their marriage had been as he believed. Narration filled the moments between statements. Daniel recalled early dinners, anniversaries, quiet evenings in the kitchen, and realized how every memory now carried a shadow. Claire's careful smiles, her distant glances, the secrecy he had dismissed, all became evidence of deliberate manipulation. He had loved a stranger for 23 years. Marcus testified first, recounting his surveillance, the discovery of the sealed records, and the photograph Daniel had seen months earlier. His voice was steady, factual, a cold contrast to the storm of emotion Daniel felt inside. "Mrs. Harper," Marcus said, "is capable of calculated deception. But that night, Mr. Harper's actions were defensive, reactive, and ultimately unavoidable." Claire's attorney presented her side through the recordings Daniel had made. Her voice, calm and precise, explained her fear, the manipulation she endured, and her attempts to survive a life that had trapped her before Daniel even met her. The courtroom hung on every word. Her confession was partial, selective, but terrifying in its clarity. Daniel's turn came. He described the fear, the love, the betrayal, and the struggle for truth. Dialogue punctuated the narration as he recounted key moments, confrontations, warnings, and the night of the stabbing. "I did what I had to do to survive," he said quietly, voice cracking. "But I loved her, and I still do. That love doesn't excuse what happened, but it explains why I stayed." Outside the courtroom, the media tried to capture every flicker of emotion. Inside, jurors listened intently, weighing morality against legality, love against violence. The tension was cinematic, a dance between truth, perception, and justice. The prosecution and defense argued over motives, psychological breakdowns, and the weight of long, hidden secrets. Every piece of evidence, every testimony, every recorded confession painted a picture both sympathetic and damning. Daniel realized that the story was no longer just theirs. It belonged to the law, to the public, to the collective judgment of society. Finally, the judge delivered instructions to the jury. Daniel sat back, exhausted, the weight of anticipation pressing down. Claire watched him from across the room, eyes unreadable. For a fleeting moment, he saw the woman he had loved behind the mask of secrets. But that vision vanished as quickly as it appeared. The jury deliberated for hours. Daniel thought of Marcus, of Evan, of every lie, every truth, and every choice that had led them here. He understood now that justice was not black and white. It was a spectrum where morality, fear, survival, and love collided. When the verdict returned, Daniel's heart pounded like a drum. Acquitted on grounds of self-defense, but not absolved of complicity, he left the courtroom alone, free in law, but fractured in soul. The trial had revealed everything, yet some truths would remain forever buried between them. Outside, the cold wind hit his face. He took a deep breath, knowing the next step reconciliation with his own conscience, the haunting memories and the echoes of love and lies, would take a lifetime to navigate. And as he walked away from the courthouse, Daniel knew one thing with absolute certainty. The past may have been exposed, but the shadows of their marriage would follow him forever. Daniel walked out of the courthouse into a gray, overcast afternoon. The wind cut across the plaza, carrying with it the muted clamor of reporters and onlookers, but he felt detached, removed, as if he were observing someone else's life. Freedom had a bitter taste. He was acquitted, legally unbound, yet morally trapped in the wreckage of a marriage built on lies and violence. Narration carried him inward. Every step echoed with memories of the anniversary, the knife, the blood on the floor, and Claire's haunted eyes. Justice had been served in the eyes of the law, but the emotional toll was unquantifiable. The courtroom had been a stage where facts, fears, and betrayals were dissected, but it had revealed only fragments of the truth. Some pieces, Claire's full story, her intentions, her fear, would never be entirely known. Daniel stopped at a nearby park, the same one where he and Claire had once walked, hand in hand, 23 years ago. He sat on a bench, hands clasped, staring at the still water. Dialogue now lived only in memory, her reassurances, his protests, the final warnings. Each word had carried multiple layers: love, manipulation, survival, but all of it had led to tragedy. He reflected on Marcus, who had guided him through the maze of hidden identities, photographs, and sealed records. Evan, too, whose life had been threatened, whose blood had marked the anniversary floor, haunted him. The people drawn into Claire's secret world had all paid a price. Justice, he realized, was rarely fair, never tidy. Daniel reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. The recording he had made of Claire's confessions still rested there, a fragile testament to the truth. He listened once more, hearing her voice in full, unfiltered. There was love there, genuine, flawed, desperate, but entwined with deception so deep it had reshaped his life entirely. He understood that surviving her truth required living with a duality, forgiveness for what could not be controlled, judgment for what could. Even as he reflected, a part of him still longed for Claire, not the woman who had hidden a past and brandished a knife, but the one who had loved quietly, fiercely, despite circumstances. That love had existed, but it was inseparable from lies, and he knew reconciliation was impossible. He had seen what survival demanded, and it came at a cost no law could fully account for. Daniel rose from the bench, feeling the weight of years pressing down, yet also a strange clarity. Life would continue, imperfect, fractured, but real. Justice had arrived, uneven and incomplete, leaving wounds unhealed but lessons painfully etched. As he walked away, the recording slipped back into his pocket, a reminder that some truths were meant to survive only in memory. Claire's absence, the choices, the violence, they were now threads woven into the fabric of his life, and somewhere in that quiet, Daniel understood that justice might never be clean, but it had its place. The law had absolved him, but only he could reckon with what remained inside. The anniversary had ended in blood, deception, and revelation. The world had moved on. Daniel knew he had to, too, but the echoes of love and betrayal would never leave him. The story of their marriage had reached its legal conclusion, but its shadow would follow him forever.